Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with our co-hosts Gardner, Sydney, and Phil.
And you're Tony.
And I'm Tony, yeah. I forget that all the time, thank you. We all met last night, as a matter of fact, before today, and we were at a writer's coffee house. In fact, it was the New England Writers Coffee House in Andover, Mass. At the
bookstore.
Andover Bookstore.
Andover Bookstore.
That's all it's called, Andover Bookstore.
Yeah, It was a great time. And who put it on?
Christopher Golden.
Yeah, and Mr.
James
Moore.
Jim Moore.
Yeah.
Christopher Golden, Jim Moore. It was a great time. They're both icons in the industry, and they did. I thought they did a pretty good job.
They
They
chose
did a great job.
Yeah.
They chose a great place too, because it's the second oldest bookstore in the country.
In the country, yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been going there since I was a kid.
Yeah, you
Really?
live there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, next town over.
Well, it's a great place to get signed books.
Yeah.
And then they have a lot of functions like this, because I've gone to Chris's book signings there. His, what do you call that when you do something, a debut?
Yeah.
All right. Now, who is Chris Golden, by the way?
Chris Golden, he's a she's more than a horror author. He's a genre.
Yeah, his genre, speculative fiction. Yeah.
All sorts of different things, and we'll actually talk about Chris a little bit later on. But Chris has done horror, he's done thrillers. He didn't do a romance, but he said all his books have romance in them.
Graphic novels.
He's done graphic novels, a lot of TV tie-ins. So some of your favorite movies, some of your favorite TV shows. He's done books. Buffy, I think, is one
a lot
of the ones
of Buffy.
he's done.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's won multiple awards. He's known all over the place. And
Movie deals. His latest book was Tin Men, New York Times bestseller. He's got Snowblind, which I talk about quite a bit. That's another one I'll talk about in the future. Just a terrific author. And Jim Moore, same thing with Jim. His Seven Forges series of books, fantasies.
New fantasy series, absolutely epic.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. So if you like, it's not even medieval, it's pre-medieval, I think.
Yeah.
It's just
Or alternate
world type
world
thing.
thing, yeah.
It is just fantastic. And again, we'll talk about Jim Moore a little bit later too. So thank you for tuning in tonight. We've got some special guests for you, and we're going to get right to them. We have a special guest here for you. This is Stacey Longo, author of many horror short stories and novels. She's joining us with Sid. We're going to talk about her latest novel, Ordinary Boy, and a little bit about some of your short work. You got a bio to read.
Yes. Stacey Longo grew up on a dairy farm in Glastonbury, Connecticut. She lived on Block Island, Rhode Island for 10 years, where she began her writing career as a humor columnist for the Block Island Times from 2000 to 2006. Upon returning to Connecticut, she turned her pen to horror writing. Her short stories have appeared in numerous anthologies and Shroud magazine. Aside from penning novels and short stories, Stacey is the owner of Books and Booze Publishing and a freelance editor.
You do it
Very
all.
nice.
I try.
Not only horror, but you do a lot of humor, and you do children's books.
I do. Yes, I have 2 children's books out right now.
Yeah, I saw that. One is My Mom Has MS.
Yeah, I wrote that for one of my closest friends has MS, and I actually wrote it for her and her family to help them fundraise for the National MS Society.
Wow.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's-
But let's talk about Ordinary Boy. I read that this past weekend. I got to say, I was blown away. It was an excellent
Thank you.
book, and I can't recommend it highly enough to anyone who loves coming-of-age stories. And speaking of coming age, was that intentional? The book starts out with Curtis Price. It's his POV, and through the whole book, when he was a very young boy. From there, it goes on till he becomes a teenager, and he meets his grisly fate. And I'm sure you'll give us some background on that in a minute. But we're taking through his life from the time he wants to play with dolls. He's wondering if he was gay. His first kiss with Stinky Pinky. Wet Dreams, and that's when we realize that we're not reading a young adult novel. It gets a little explicit, up until he has his first real sexual experience. As a male, I thought you hit all of those life-defining moments perfectly.
Thank you.
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, I just put myself in that young man's situation, and everything he did just rung true. How did you put yourself into a young boy's head?
It wasn't easy. When I started out, I knew it's very, very loosely based on a true story in that I went to high school with a kid who was shot by his stepfather, but that's really the only part of it that's true. When I set out to write it, I thought I was going to write a horror novel, but as I developed Curtis as a character, he kind of dictated how it was going to go, and so it became more of a coming-of-age novel. I set it in the 80s because I grew up in the 80s, so.
You write what you know.
Exactly, yeah. So that part was easy, although I'm sure, like, when I was growing up in the 80s, the most traumatic thing for me was when Nick Rhodes of Duran Duran got married. But I remember things like the People magazine with Rock Hudson on the cover. I remember seeing that in CVS and my mother gasping.
All these references
Yeah.
that are in the book, yeah.
Yeah, so I was able to work, some of my experiences into that, but I was a teenage girl, and of course I'm writing from the perspective of a teenage boy. And luckily, I belong to 2 writers' groups, and they are largely male. Thank God. Because as I was writing this and trying to hit on the most important milestones of a young boy, growing up, they were very helpful. Like, for instance, when I wrote the scene when Curtis has his first wet dream, it was very traumatic for him when I first wrote it. I had him, he thought he had cancer. I mean, he was very scared. He thought he was dying. And one of the guys in my writers group had to gently say to me, it actually feels pretty good.
Yeah.
you need to rewrite this scene. So that was helpful. And I have 2 nephews. They were 8 and 11 when I started writing Ordinary Boy, and I have a very patient sister. Mm-hmm. So if I wasn't sure how a young man would react to something, I would just ask them. So thank God.
You did a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
It really, like I said, it hit home with me, and that's difficult for, I would think, a woman to write, but you did it. You did well.
Thank
Well, again, we're going to stick with Ordinary Boy for a few minutes. The theme that runs through Ordinary Boy is abuse. From when he's, a young child and having people make fun of his name, which is, I can remember myself doing that to other people, and other people doing it to me, other kids doing it to me. Getting the crap beat out of them, which every kid goes through, unless you're the bully and you're doing the beating. And I was never the bully. So, and to being shunned with his first kiss with Stinky Pinky. And I'm gonna ask you when you answer the question just to talk a little bit about Stinky Pinky and let us know how you came up with her. All the way up to his mom's new husband, who's mostly threatening him through the whole book. But by the time I shouldn't say when the book ends, because it doesn't end with the shooting, but until a very late portion of the book where he actually does physically harm the child. How did you feel when you wrote about these abuses? I mean, they had to affect you somehow. Was it tough to write them? Did you get? Is this from experience? I mean,
No, I would like to go on the record right now. My parents were lovely, normal people. With a lot of the things that happened to Curtis, there was a method to my madness. Like there's always a reason for it happening, and I often tried to have payoff for Curtis when these abuses were happening. Like when we start off with Curtis, he has a gang. I mean, he's got the neighborhood kids that he hangs out with, and for instance, when he first meets Albert, he's kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to be friends with you because it's fat asthmatic Albert and he's the real loser of the school. And when he has the kiss with Stinky Pinky and everybody shuns him, that really solidifies the relationship with Albert. Albert's the only one who will still be friends with him, and that core friendship takes him through high school. Mm-hmm. So in order for them to get closer, he had to lose those other friends. So, and then with when he got the crap beaten out of him by Bobby Foley, the payoff for Curtis for that was when his new girlfriend Penny shows up at the house. Her reaction is, "Oh my God, why would he do this? What are we going to do to get back at him?" And I think in the book, Curtis says this cape that she's imagining me in feels good. Nobody's ever looked at Curtis that way, that he might be the kind of kid that says, well, I'll get back at you. So it's the first time somebody sees him as more than he sees himself.
Yeah. And you actually feel elated for him when you're reading that. You did a good job.
Oh, thank you. Oh, good. Yeah, I liked Penny. Penny was all right. I liked the way she handled Curtis. So
and I won't give out a spoiler, but it was unique to me, anyways, what he did to get back at Bobby for the beating.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. He does get his revenge. So yeah. So And then with the stepfather, really, I had to, one of the earlier drafts of Ordinary Boy, he was less abusive. I mean, he was a little bit of a jerk, but he wasn't bad. And then as I was revising it, I thought, you know what, the ending is going to come out of nowhere, and it's going to jip the reader, like, oh, this guy was totally normal, which is fine. Like, it happens. The BTK was a normal, everyday guy, as far as anybody knew. But I needed to plant those seeds in there so that it wasn't a total shock when George finally does what he does. It was hard. The hardest thing to do was, I knew from the beginning when I started out that I was killing off Curtis, and that was very hard to do.
They say you kill your darlings, but that was a tough one. I mean, that was
so hard.
Geez. Since we brought that up, I'm going to ask you another question, and we spoke about this briefly. Every kid, when they're depressed, thinks, oh my God, I'm going to die, and I wonder who's going to go to my funeral. You actually wrote almost a quarter of the book about who goes to his funeral and the consequences of his death, and how his friends were affected by it. It was brilliant. I mean, on a couple different levels. How did you come up with that? That was, to me, was amazing.
Thank you. It was, all right. What happened was, when I was shopping around Ordinary Boy, trying to sell the manuscript, Dark Alley Press, when they expressed interest, Nanette Blake, who's the managing editor there, she called me and she said, we like the book, but I want another 20,000 words. And I think you can do it at the end. And I went, oh boy. And then, but I tend to be kind of a people pleaser, so I was like, you want 20,000 words in 6 weeks? I'm your girl. I'll do it. So, yeah. So I looked at the end, and originally I had ended with Curtis's death in the closet, and then I went to like a 2-page epilogue, and that was it. So I was like, all right, if this is going to be developed more, this is where it's going to be.
That's where you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Curtis's death was so depressing and so, so hard to, write, and it was really a downer. So I thought it would be fun to have him go to his own funeral, crack jokes. I'm the kind of person that cracks jokes at funerals anyway. So, and I think a lot of kids too, especially that age, when you're a teenager and the first time one of your peers dies, and it's really a shock to you. And I do think kids start thinking about, gee, what would happen if I died? Who would come to my funeral? And it was a great opportunity too to bring in more people that Curtis had touched while he was alive that I couldn't address in that 2-page epilogue. I was able to bring them in, all those neighborhood kids. I could bring in Dottie from the convalescent home, and the woman whose father, Mr. Valley, from the convalescent home that he grew close to, just to show more that he had really touched a lot of people.
Just to explain, he's a ghost, basically.
Right.
And he's floating around, and he gets to see who comes to his funeral, and he makes comments about it, and he's shocked and he's surprised. He's never depressed, though. I mean, he accepts his fate, and we don't know what's going to happen to him, but we follow him along. We follow along with him, and his comments are sometimes they're funny as hell, and sometimes they're a little bit heartbreaking. But it's kind of neat to see that. You just fulfilled so many fantasies of young people. It was cool. Yeah, you've got a question.
Yeah, it sort of plays off what we were just talking about, him, Curtis at his own funeral, and what you said about cracking jokes. You're very adept at combining humor with horror, which is a very difficult thing to pull off, and especially with effective results. So when you're writing these combination type tales and working in humor with horror, which comes first when you're fleshing out the idea for a story, the humor or the horror? Is it the horror and then you work in the humor, or?
That's a great question.
Why, yes, it is. I never think I'm going to be writing something funny, ever. I always think I'm going to write a horror novel, without a doubt. And I'm always thinking of like these very dark and depressing circumstances. This would make a great story. And then as I'm writing, the humor just naturally comes into it. I mean, even coming here, when we were in the elevator in the hotel, Kristi and I were cracking up over the hotel buttons. I mean, life is ridiculous. We have to laugh at it. And it's very hard for me to stay dark and depressing and serious when I'm writing anything. So I think
you're
it's
naturally
just
a humorous person.
Oh,
anyways.
thank you.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it automatically comes through. Plus, I always have that instinct when something is really serious and dark. I want to crack that joke and lighten the mood. So Yeah, so it definitely, I think, comes through, but I never intend to be funny, no.
Well, it's a great tension breaker when you're reading and you come to a humorous part, but you manage to make it throughout the whole story or throughout the whole novel. There's always the underpinnings of humor.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I did when I had to look through like second edits for Ordinary Boy, and I was, it had been like 6 months since I had looked at it, so I was looking at it again. I'm like, wow, that Curtis Price is pretty funny.
Pretty funny
That's
guy.
all right, yeah.
I want to just talk a little bit about your short work, just give it some equal time here. You have one of the best short story collections I've ever read, Secret Things. It is fantastic, and that's another book of Stacey's I would highly recommend you try to find. You got Insanity Tales and Insanity Tales 2.
Yep.
And you've got stories in both of them, and it's an anthology with other writers.
Yep.
Can you give us a little background on Books and Booze and Insanity Tales?
Sure. I belong to a writers collaborative. It's more than just a writers group. We actually pool our resources and our knowledge to try and put out the best work possible. Some of us are traditionally published, some of us are self-published, and so we work together to promote each other and do the best that we can together as a unit. Visit us online, storyside.com, thestoryside.com, sorry. And so last January 2014, one of the guys in the group said, we should really work to polish up some of our best work, some of our best short stories, and present it as a unit. And we can all market it, we can all promote it, and we just have to get someone to publish it. And I said, hey, I have a printer, I have a small press. We can put it out through Books and Booze Press. And so we all worked together, we workshopped the stories, and really our intent with it was to promote each other. So if you pick up the book because you like me and I have 2 stories in it and you're reading it and then you find David Daniel, who's phenomenal.
Fantastic writer.
Then so maybe you go buy a David Daniel novel because of that. So,
it made me look him up.
Yeah, see,
did, yeah.
There you go. So it worked. And then we had so much fun doing it. We have a second one coming out in October.
Oh, it's not out yet?
It's not out yet. It'll be out first week of October.
Oh, so I was one of the lucky ones to get to read it.
That's right.
Oh,
you
man,
were.
it was good. Who are some of the other authors?
David Daniel, who is traditionally published through Macmillan. Vlad Vaslin, who is largely self-published. Ursula Wong, who's published through Small Press. Rob Smales, who is published Small Press. And Dale Phillips, who is self-published.
We've got a minute left here, so I'm going to just finish it up with your next novel is My Sister the Zombie, young adult novel, though it does have elements of horror and mystery in it. Pick a genre already, will you? I mean, can't you just stay at one simple...
I can't help it. When I started that book, I really wanted to write about the relationship between sisters. My sister and I are very, very close, and I just really want to write a story for her. And then I thought, boy, it would be fun to, make my sister a zombie. And then, you know what? Maybe someone in town is eating brains, so now it's horror. So, it just kind of happens. I can't help it.
Well, I've told you before, I consider you the female Jeff Strand. I mean,
That's a huge, huge compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, you're extremely talented, and I love your stuff, and I'll read anything you put out.
Oh, thank you.
And speaking of reading, you going to do a little reading for us?
I am. We have
Good,
time
great.
for that?
We do. We have 5
Okay.
minutes.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to read a little bit from Ordinary Boy. This is actually from the funeral scene that we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
It's just a little snippet of that. So Curtis is at his own funeral, and people are showing up, and he's a little bit surprised. A thin lady with black hair pulled tightly in a bun approaches Penny. She's escorting 2 young women who are probably only a year or 2 younger than me. I'm Renee Allen, she explains, shaking Mr. Paradise's hand, then hugging Penny. I've seen you around Sunnybrook. Curtis took such great care of my stepfather when he was there. Lewis Valley? Penny nods, stupefied. These are my girls, Amy and Jenna. Their grandfather talked about Curtis all the time. He always took the time to listen to Dad and look at his pictures. We had to come pay our respects. She herds her girls into the church, which is quickly becoming standing room only. And still they come. A stunning ebony woman with cropped black hair walks in, holding a young girl of maybe 4 firmly by the hand. The little girl's hair has been wrangled into 2 ponytails. She has extra elastic bands all through her pigtails, so it looks like she has 2 chains of silky black cotton balls sticking out of her head. Penny doesn't know the woman or the child, but I do. Here is Jill Jackson, all grown up, looking as luscious as I remember from my youth. Two guys are jostling to get in through the church doors. A quiet girl in a short black dress and wearing way too much eyeliner waits behind them. One of the guys spots Penny and comes over, holding out his hand. "You must be Curtis's girlfriend," he says solemnly. His serious tone doesn't quite match his outfit, which consists of black jeans, a black leather jacket, and a black and white bandana across his forehead. "I'm Corona. Eric and me, we were friends with Curtis. That's Emily behind him. She insisted on tagging along. We thought we'd make the drive up from Connecticut, to honor our brother and all that." He's playing the role of ambassador from Connecticut to the hilt. Al's eyebrows shoot up, but he comes over and shakes Corona's hand. "Thanks for coming," he says. His eyes fill, which is not something he wants these nonchalant, confident guys to see. Corona spots it and claps Al on the back. "Sorry for your loss, man. We'll hang out after the service and exchange stories." Al nods gratefully. "I guess I didn't realize he might have made friends," Al whispers to Penny. "They're so much cooler than I am." "Stop it," Penny says. "You are his best friend. Now shut up and help me." It's time to go in. Hymns are played and the pastor gives a lovely speech. Penny is invited to the pulpit to read a Robert Frost poem. She breathes deeply, steeling herself, and makes her way forward. She pauses at the coffins and then lays a soft hand on my casket. The charm bracelet I'd given her for her birthday last year jangles down her wrist and clinks against the wood. She lifts her hand up to kiss the palm, then touches my casket again. She steps up to the podium and looks out. A sea of faces gaze back. Some are crying, some are smiling in encouragement. All are waiting. She begins to read, voice wavering at first, then gaining strength. Here it is, the proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I was. At the reception afterwards, Penny makes her way through the crowd, stopping occasionally to accept murmurs of condolence. The platters of food have been demolished, yet people still continue to hang out. I stick with Penny, hearing what she hears, seeing what she sees. She stops at a table full of Meadows kids. Her curiosity and defensiveness about what Bobby Foley might be saying has gotten the best of her. She's satisfied to see that Pinky is included at the table, listening to the banter. "God, remember when Curtis fell out that tree? You never heard a guy howl so loud. I thought he'd been impaled by a branch or something," Jill Jackson says. The Ewing twins guffaw. "What?" Jill says. You do know why Curtis was up that tree, don't you?" Jill turns toward Bobby. "Because he was a boy and it was a tree?" Why does any kid climb a tree? Because it's there." No, not for our boy Curtis, not exactly," Bobby says, smiling. "Now I'm his boy? Am I in some weird alternate universe?" Bobby interrupts my thoughts. "He was trying to look down your shirt." "What?" Jill squeals, but she blushes too. The table erupts in laughter and I watch them. I grew up with these kids. I hadn't thought they'd noticed. Penny smiles wistfully and moves on. Before following Penny, I quickly take a peek down Jill's top. My spirit soars. Still impressive. Penny stops near the beverage table where the picture of me, Mom, and Sally sits, blown up to 8 by 10 and framed. She picks it up and runs her fingers over my face, across my two-dimensional cheek. "I guess for most people, life just goes on," she says out loud, maybe to me. How am I supposed to do that?
That was excellent.
Wow.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Very
very much.
good.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure. It really was.
Definitely our pleasure.
You can find Ordinary Boy at all retail online outlets and I guess some bookstores or
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So thank you again, Stacey. We're going to have you're going to stay here, I guess, and you're going to
Yeah.
sit there with Phil
And-
and talk to Kristi
Yeah.
Peterson Schoonover.
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 Yeah.
You know me in names. I'm terrible. So thank you for watching this portion, and we'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, hi, we're here with Kristi Peterson Schoonover, who we're very honored to have here with us tonight. Phil's going to be interviewing her, and I'm going to start by reading her bio. Kristi Peterson Schoonover's short fiction has been featured in the Adirondack Review, Carpe Articulum Literary Review, and many other places. By far, however, her favorite short pieces are those she wrote specifically for anthologies as diverse as Unnatural Tales of the Jackalope, canopic jars, tales of mummies and mummification, From the Corner of Your Eye, cryptids, and bugs. Skeletons in the Swimming Hole, Tales from Haunted Disney World, her collection of ghost stories set in Disney parks, has been called spooky alchemy at its finest by famous monsters of filmland's Peter Schwartzer. Her Pushcart-nominated novel, Bad Apple, was noted deeply disturbing in the best way possible by Sci-Fi Saturday Night. She is co-editor for Read Short Fiction and the recipient of Norman Mailer Writers Colony Winter 2010, 2011, and 2012 residencies. She holds a BA in Creative Writing and Literature from Burlington College in Vermont and an MFA in Creative Writing from Goddard College. Go you. Prior to all of that, she was
also very expensive.
She was a student at the University of Rhode Island, where up until 2014, she was a member of the Perron Writers Group. Besides writing, she has stage managed numerous productions, including Night of the Iguana and The Woman in Black.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you made it up. You had, and Stacey had a 3-hour drive approximately to get here.
Yeah. It was fun though, road trip, you know.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks for making the drive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
We were excited.
Yeah, and I'm
good.
glad you made it. And when I say good people, you are good people. If you lived closer, I would probably hang out with you much more.
Thank
because
you.
I consider you a really good friend of mine. And
Thank you.
And yet, the way I met you is through your fiction, because that's how we met, all of us actually.
Yeah.
And so I have some questions about that fiction, and since I know a lot about you already, I got detailed questions. And so the first question I have, and I wrote them down since they're very detailed. One thing I've noticed is that you are a fan of dark fiction, and you are also an uber fan of all things Disney. Your knowledge of the 2014 horror film Escape from Tomorrow, which was shot entirely in Disney parks, demonstrated to me that you know more about Disney than anyone I have ever known.
Mm-hmm.
And that is honest. It's crazy. How did you become a fan of Disney, and what clicked in your mind to bring horror and Disney together in your collections, the one that Sydney mentioned, Skeletons in the Swimming Hole, Tales from Haunted Disney?
Well, my grandmother, my dad's mom, lived in Daytona Beach. So pretty much from the time I was born, I was going to Walt Disney World because it was like an hour and 15 minutes. So whenever we'd go down there, my parents would take me. There are pictures of me like, you know, yay high, like hugging, you know, the White Rabbit's leg and stuff. So I think that's how my love of Disney really got started, because it was really ingrained in me really young. And my dad was a writer too, and he taught short fiction. So everything was emphasis on story. And of course, Disney is very big on story. When I got a little older, my mom got cancer and she struggled with that for 8 years. Yeah. And there were 3 children after me. So she was pretty sick. And so from the time I was 8 years old, I was kind of also taking care of them a little bit and helping out. And Disney it kind of morphed into not necessarily this place where we always went on vacation. For us, it really became a place where that disease couldn't encroach. For the time we were there, we could have the illusion of having a normal childhood. And this kind of dovetails into why I thought to marry the horror with the Disney aspect, because Disney is dark. First of all, there's a lot of dark in Disney that people don't necessarily key into unless you're, you know, paying attention to it. But the escape, it struck me, was always temporary. I mean, we can't escape ourselves. We would go to Disney World and we'd have a great time, and you know, we'd ride on Big Thunder Mountain, which was my first roller coaster ever, that my brother was like, you need to get on that roller coaster, and I don't care. And I was like, all right, I did it, and now I'm an addict years later. But when we got home, you know, Mom was still sick. Everybody was still unhappy. There were still, and I was like, you know, you can escape, but you can never escape yourself. And you can put yourself, and you can be in the happiest place on earth and still be upset or lonely or feeling lost. And it's happened to me, and I know it's happened to other people, you know, where there's those moments where you're just sad because it brings you back to your past and the things that haunt you. So it's bittersweet. My romance with Disney is very, very bittersweet. But not being able to escape your problems is really the true horror in the world. We can put them down for a little bit, but when you go to somewhere where they're going to make your dreams come true, even if it's for an hour, it's amazing because you get that actual vacation from yourself that you're probably not going to get anywhere else.
All right.
Wow.
So,
Well, let's go to the next question here.
sorry, did I bring everybody
No,
down?
Well, I
Seven,
know,
not just-
I know.
Let's all go slow this
No,
time.
that was really
Well,
profound.
unfortunately, the next question is probably going to be, you're going to answer the same way.
Maybe not. You
All
don't
right.
know.
I've only read 3 books in my life twice, and that's Watership Down, We Need to Talk About Kevin, and your book, Bad Apple. And
That's really
Says a
cool.
lot.
I know.
That says
To be
a
included
lot.
with Watership Down, which terrified me as a child, is awesome. But anyway, go ahead.
well, there was a reason for this, and I wrote it down here. It is absolutely a fantastic novel.
Thank you.
It was nominated for the Pushcart Award, as Sydney mentioned, and I have a 2-part question based off of that, and that is, explain what a Pushcart Award is for the folks who are watching or listening that don't know what it is, and the book itself, explain how this tale of a young woman coming to grips with the death of her mother, which sounds similar to what you just mentioned, and turning into the caregiver of her family can itself become dark fiction.
Yeah, well, the Pushcart Prize is really pretty famous. It's the best of small presses. It's been going on since 1976. And small literary magazines, independent publishers, and the editors of the Pushcart Press, which puts together the anthology of all the winners every year, can nominate up to 6 titles. 6 titles can be, I think there's poetry, short stories, there's a couple of other ones, and then there's isolated first chapter of a novel, which is what Bad Apple was nominated for. It's really tough competition to even be nominated because even though it might be your own publisher, they have to look at their backlist every year and go, okay, we're only allowed 6, and sometimes they limit themselves to 2. I mean, I've never heard of places nominating 6. Usually they pick 1 or 2. I edit the magazine Read Short Fiction. We nominate for the Pushcart, and it's hard. In fact, last year we did not nominate because we just didn't feel that we had something that was really, that we were so enamored with, we just had to. So it's hard to even get a nomination. And also, when you're nominated, you are being read by highly qualified people that are totally anonymous. You never know who they are. And you're up against a lot of heavy hitters. So it's really neat to just know that your work is being put in front of others. So even if you don't win, it's an awesome thing to be nominated. I cried when I found out I got nominated. I was so
I'll
excited.
bet.
And as far as the dark story about coming of age and losing the mother, I think from a technical standpoint, Bad Apple is dark because it does borrow a lot from Edgar Allan Poe. We have the unreliable narrator, number one. And I don't want to give it away, but you know the book. And as the book progresses, you don't know whether or not what you're seeing is really true or if it's in her head. And it also deals with Poe's trigger. Edgar Allan Poe usually had 4 triggers for driving people mad, and one of them was guilt. And as you know what happens in this book. So she's not only saddled with guilt, she's saddled with responsibility at a very young age. And in many ways, Bad Apple, which I wrote in 9 days, the whole thing came flying out of me in 9 days.
Wow.
It then spent 5 years in editing, so it was like a mess. It needed a lot of work. But I think it was that raw story of me trying to process what had happened to me through fiction. But as far as why it's dark, it's not only the subject matter, it's also the way I specifically structured it. I was studying a lot of Poe at the time because I was at Burlington then, and I was doing a whole survey of Poe's work, and that was really kind of what I got out of it, and so that's why it's dark.
Wow.
So,
Well, let's get into one more thing that isn't dark, and that is humor.
oh,
And
no.
Now, just knowing you as a person, anyone who knows you will agree that you are a hoot. Because
Well,
you can
thank you.
bring down the house with your laughter, your one-liners, and whatnot.
Thank you.
But with your fiction, even though we're talking about a lot of dark fiction here, one thing that seems to permeate your fiction is the dark humor that follows throughout the story. And the thing I want to ask you is, how are you able to translate your bubbly personality into the dark fiction that you write, coming from someone that doesn't seem to be always depressed?
Oh boy, that is a really good question. First of all, I'm flattered because I never ever thought of myself as a funny person. I never did. My dad was always kind of harping on the fact that I was too morose.
Really?
Yeah, so I never thought of myself as funny. And in fact, sometimes somebody will come to me and say, "Oh my God, I read your short story. I laughed through the whole thing." And I'm like, "Really?" Because I wasn't trying to be funny, which used to horrify me. I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm funny. I'm not scary." But I think when I am writing, I step into that world that I'm in, and it's almost like I'm watching a movie and I'm there as an observer. So I think that any of the horror that emerges, humor that emerges naturally, just kind of comes out of the way that I see the world. And the reason it doesn't become parody is because I'm not trying to do anything funny. And also, I think the dark humor, my sister Missy has the same thing. She's got that dark humor thing too, and it'll just come out and it's hysterical. But if you were to sit down and say, "Do you think you're a funny person?" she'd be like, "No." It's just the way she sees the world. So I think there's your answer. It's not a very impressive answer, but it is an answer nonetheless.
Sydney, I think you have a question for Ms. Peterson.
Yeah, I mean, you've done all of this fantastic work, and are very impressive. Bad Apple sounds just absolutely amazing, and all of your short stories in the anthologies. So what can we expect from you next?
Well, I am working on a new novella, so I'm working on that. And I've got I have a second collection of Disney short stories that I've been telling Phil I've been working on for a while now, and I just got to finish it. I'm also doing a bunch of other creative projects that are not related to writing. I'm working on a new video series called This Writing Life that I do in all my spare time. And I really need to clean my house. No, I really need to clean my house. That's my next project.
We all need to clean our houses.
I need to stop writing and clean my house. And I do judging for competitions too. So I have a lot of deadlines coming up for that. So I'm going to be working on a lot of those coming up shortly. So.
All right. Well, why don't you let the listeners or viewers hear some of your work? What did you want to read from?
I will read a little bit from Bad Apple,
Nice.
if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I actually was going to read from the short story Stones, and I apologize for this phone thing. Like, I just got back from Walt Disney World, and my head is still. No, I really
Why
did.
are we not
I got back like
surprised?
yesterday. I'm still like, oh.
Where's the book?
I'm still hearing It's a Small World in my head every night. It's really bad. I have to drink to make it stop. So anyway, okay. So this is from Bad Apple, and this is the beginning. Scarborough. That's my name. Yes, I know that's an uncomfortable name for a girl. My cousin told me I was named for the state's racetrack. That's dumb, she said. Not as dumb as you, I countered. I knew her mom didn't do word-a-day flashcards with her during breakfast, didn't encourage her to use words like acerbic in sentences while she did her chores, and didn't make her read thick books without any pictures. But then my cousin passed me a sun-faded postcard she'd found in one of mom's dilapidated trunks in the attic. On the front, an Alpine-styled hotel room with red satin bedspreads and cutouts of pine trees on the headboards. Nothing beats the Towers Hotel. Our elegant sky-high cocktail bar offers happy hour against gravity-defying views of Scarborough Downs and the city of Portland. On the back, her spider script noted she was having a great time at the track betting on the horses with a name that didn't belong to my father. Well, a name that didn't belong to the man I assumed was my father. I don't think he was around before I started walking, and I associated him with my first day at kindergarten. He would sit at our kitchen table, a door slapped across 2 stacks of cinder blocks, in the same pair of jeans and t-shirt he'd arrived in the night before, And he'd say things to me, Mom, like he should move in and take over running the business end of the orchard. When he did what he said, I assumed at the time he must be the one. But after I saw the postcard, which was dated about 9 months before I was born, I wasn't sure. I, therefore, couldn't think of a suitable retort for my cousin, so I just crumpled the postcard, rammed it into my pocket, and demanded she go home. But it wasn't over, because from that moment, I was uncertain where I really came from. Well, except from me mom's birth canal. So half of me was missing, and my special name wasn't a substitute. I was not a Jane or an Erica or one of the 5 Marys in my kindergarten class. The big boys picked raisin-fat boogers from their noses, smeared them on their pants, and jeered, "Look, it's the scar, the human scar." As they got older, and about as clever as their genes were ever going to allow them to get, they got creative and put a Y at the end, as in, "Oh, you're so scary, scary scar," which goes to show you how stupid they were, because my nickname is Scree. When I got older, I thought about those boys a lot. If they'd ever procreated like me, Mom, and whoever. If they'd be in sticky bars, swilling beer and hoping to cop a feel. If they'd have enough money in their fake alligator wallets to get some unfortunate girls who had probably begun the night with handbags full of high hopes, drunk enough to engage in sex in the back seats of their cars. I didn't know anything about sex when I was that age, but I did know about orgasms. Hush Hush was what I called it, and I thought of it as a game of sorts. I didn't have my first one with a boy. I had it with a stuffed bear that me mom had saved her pennies to buy me one Christmas. I had seen that bear in Pinky's toy barn. It had been made by the woman who lived on the hill above our orchard, and its fur was as downy as the chicks we used to have when our coop was still up and running. We used to go to the county fair every August and bring home a few chicks. Me mom always bought them to try to teach my brother arable responsibility. And he was good and upstanding and oh so responsible. He really was. In a month or so, the puffballs blossomed into spiteful Rhode Island Reds or naked necks. Until they got too big, Arable let me pet them. Even though they smelled and pooped everywhere, they were my little friends. But then Arable had a fight with me mom and moved out. When me mom heard he'd shacked up with the antique store owner's daughter in a motel cottage on the other side of town, she stopped buying chicks. I begged and pleaded, but she just wouldn't do it. I missed them, and I was friendless.
Wow. Amazing.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
Yeah,
Thanks
no,
for
glad you
driving
showed
all
up.
the way up here. We were just saying before, this is the first time we've had 3 female guests,
Yep.
and actually it's the first time we've had any female guests.
That's
so I'm so glad we have a female
Yeah.
guest
And
at
one of the
all.
best ever, yeah.
And
Oh,
yes,
thank you.
particularly you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So once again, thanks for showing up. And folks can find your books in all online stores. Bad Apple, your website. They can search for Kristi Peterson Schoonover, the Norwegian spelling, S-E-N.
Even if you butcher it, there's only one of me, you'll still find me.
Yep. Absolutely.
And her name's on the screen. So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah, so
So,
hopefully we'll
yep.
check out her work.
Yeah. All right. And next up, we have another interview, so stay tuned.
Good evening again. We're here with the third interview. We've got Gard and Emily Kay. And what I'm going to do is Emily, yeah. And I'm going to read a little bit about Emily, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Gard, to ask her some questions.
Absolutely. I'm going to grill her. It's going to be tough. She doesn't have her counsel here. She's going to be in trouble with Congress.
Emily Kay Murphy has been a storyteller ever since she could talk, and a writer ever since she could write. Her published works include the Kissimmee, did I say that right?
Yep,
Good.
Kissimmee.
Kissimmee, Newport series, and Mary Hartford. Besides writing, you can find her reading or on a walk in the woods. She's currently a sophomore at Southern New Hampshire University studying, you guessed it,
Creative writing.
creative writing. Yes.
Score.
Go ahead, Gard.
Okay, Emily, it's great to see you again.
You too.
When you and I met, we were at a writers' meeting at the Toadstool Bookshop in Milford, and it was a great pleasure and an awesome surprise to meet someone who was a teenager and already had 3 books published. More than that, actually. You had 3 at the time, right?
Yep. Well, I still got 3 now, but I've got a short story or a poem in a collection, and working on the short stories. So we'll see where that goes.
You're amazingly efficient, and I know a lot of writers are told that, and they say, "No, I'm not, because you don't know what's going on in my head. I have so many other things I want to write." But not only have you produced this amount of work as a teenager, but the work is at a level, the standards of the work are extremely high, and that really, really opened my eyes. You did a reading, I looked at the work, and I said, wow, this girl's very, very talented.
I was
Thank
at
you.
that reading too.
You were there,
Yeah,
exactly.
I was there.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
It was. I think you were the highlight of the entire session.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely,
you.
absolutely. And little did she know we were gonna hit her with all these
A
compliments.
year later, yeah.
Yeah. So I have some cursory questions for you. You're a local author, right?
That's right.
Went to school here, now going to college at Southern New Hampshire, and a couple questions for you just to quickly start off. I'm going to start with the most obvious question second. Okay.
Okay.
We're going to go with the first question, and okay. So tell us what your the title of your favorite book and why.
The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, which probably isn't something anybody's heard of, but I actually discovered it through Jane Austen's novel Northanger Abbey, which The Mysteries of Udolpho is the book that the character in Northanger Abbey, Catherine Morland, is reading. So I love Jane Austen so much that I said, well, I'm going to try this out because her character liked it so much. And turns out I really liked it too. It was a good mix between like a horror and a romance and a drama. You know, it was the 1700s Gothic style romance. So, you know, they had like the terror where, you know, it's a dark hallway and there's a creepy guy, but it's not, you know, gore and monsters, which, you know, that freaks me out. So it was just a little bit of everything, which I liked a lot.
Sort of like a college dorm, dark hallway, creepy guy. There you go.
Yep,
I
pretty
got
much.
it. It's the
But
it's the
in the 1700s.
It's the 1700 version of that. That's
Yep.
And what's the title of that again?
The Mysteries of Udolpho.
How do you spell
Yes.
Udolpho?
Udolpho. Yes.
Okay, that's really cool, and it reminds me, you know, a book quoted within a book. How so often the King in Yellow is a classic motif that comes from Robert Chambers, was used by various people for years. In fact, I think even prior to Robert Chambers, and things like Carcosa and things like that. Ambrose Bierce and all these guys, H.P. Lovecraft, and a lot of these people used to use those things, but that's all fake. There's no such book. There's no such book. It was originally supposed to be a play, and if you read it, it would drive you mad and stuff. But this is a real book.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
Yep.
awesome.
And I mean, I do the same thing in my fiction. I have my character read Tom Sawyer, which, you know, it's the 1890s, so that's risque.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's ekphrasis, fancy term.
I
for
like it.
but,
So let's stay in the historical bent for a minute then, Emily. And first, why don't we mention, before we go any further, how can people find you online?
So I'm at www.emilykmurphy.com.
EmilyKMurphy.com.
Yep.
Okay.
Because if you search regular old Emily Murphy, apparently I fought for women's rights in Canada.
Good job. You're so spry. I don't know how you
She
did
gets
it.
around.
Wow, man. David Bowie, Suffragette City, right
There
here.
you
So, okay, so staying in the historical bent then. Tell us a little bit about the Kissimmee series, and also tell us a little about Mary Hartford. Tell us about essentially your books and what attracted you to writing the books and historical settings.
Sure. So the Kissimmee's Newport series is about a 9-year-old girl who's growing up in one of those gigantic Newport mansions in Rhode Island, but she hates all those rules of society. You know, her mother makes her wear dresses and do embroidery, but she wants to have fun. So she, you know, wears her brother's pants and climbs trees and generally gets her mother mad. So the way I got started writing this book was my father used to take us on mystery rides, which would be like daycations, you know, and he wouldn't tell us where we were going. So we would just drive and lo and behold, end up somewhere. And we ended up at the Breakers this one time. I was 12 years old and I hated it. They were rich, so they had big houses. So what? So I didn't like the history at the time. I didn't care that,
You were a
this
petulant
is...
child, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. It's the fancy marble. Who cares if it's a fancy marble? And eventually we ended up getting to Marble House, which they talked less about the fancy marble and look at this wonderful construction and art, and they talked more about the people who actually lived there. And the person who lived there was Consuelo Vanderbilt and her mother Alva. And Alva was a bit of a stickler, and she would, tie a metal rod to her daughter's back so she'd have proper posture, and she, forced her daughter to marry some Turkish duke. And so I said, well, I wouldn't follow all those rules. Neither would this character that I just made up.
Awesome.
And so that's how that got started. And I really discovered that historical fiction was my passion because I used to complain that all the stories that were realistic, I could just live life. And so why am I reading a book?
Right.
But all the fantasy, talking dogs, talking dragons, I can't see talking dogs and dragons every day either, and I can't relate to that. But historical fiction was a good balance between, this doesn't happen every day. I don't have a rod on my back anymore, but it still could happen somewhere in some universe. So I explored that some more in Mary Hartford, which I co-wrote with my friend Mary Leonarchik. And it's about a teenage girl who's growing up in the Industrial Revolution in England. So a lot of drama besets her family because of that. They have some money troubles, there's some illness, little romance on the side, but I don't like to give too much synopsis for that book because then it'll all start giving it away. So just go read it.
I like this. Is there? You sort of touched on this. Tell us a little bit about going with the historical settings. Are you generally a fan of history, I assume? But,
oh, yeah.
Are there other aspects to this? As you discussed, looking into these worlds it must just be interesting to learn it as well.
Yeah, it is. And I know I was raised too I almost feel set back from my generation anyway, because my mother was the youngest of her generation. My grandmother kind of married late for her generation. So I'm already being raised in this kind of historical way. So it just kind of is natural for me to, who would have been my compatriots if I, lived 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and how would I have lived then,
right.
As compared to, now. So
it's fascinating.
How much research did you do for these? It must have been a boatload of research.
There's got to be a lot.
And I actually have a somewhat different approach, I think. I sit down and I write the first draft, and it doesn't matter to me so much the research and if I'm getting it right or wrong. I want to get the story out there. And so then after that, then I go back, and as I'm doing the line edits, I go, all right, she names her dog Cupcake. Were there cupcakes then? And so you have to go and figure that out. So that's how I ended up doing all my research during the editing phase.
So
Took a couple years,
that's interesting. So you really make sure that you can get that plot down, and then afterwards, if the plot hinges on some things or includes some things, then you say, okay, I got to make sure that this is straight.
Right.
That's fascinating. Do you outline your work first? Or I guess it varies based on what the project is.
Yeah, I have an idea in mind generally. I think I know where this wants to go. The Kissimmee series, is this just this girl having fun? In the second book, I was like, I want to get her on a boat in this book, so we're going to have her go sailing. And so in one of the chapters, she goes sailing, but then all this other stuff, as I'm writing, I'm like, she could go dancing. She could, go to a dance class, and all, let's bring back the character from that first book. Yeah, let's bring her back. And so it kind of, I start with an idea, but it ends up deviating a lot. So
that's really really cool. I'm contemplating. Well, I want to mention to the audience that you speak at schools.
Yes,
and if schools
I do.
are interested in contacting
Mostly
you to come in,
schools, so,
elementary schools, and in some libraries, some school libraries, they have your book. So people, if they're at a school, they're watching this, whether it's Goffstown or someplace else, and they would like to have a person who is close to that age who can inspire some of the kids who might be interested in this and finding out about it, they can contact you and invite you over, right?
Of course, yep. And I've talked about everything from writing to publishing to just the history in my books, content-wise. So, yeah, I'm open for anything.
Excellent. Okay, what are you working on now? In addition to college.
Yeah, in addition to all my classes, I'm working on the third book in the Kissimmee series. So that one's 1896. And in my research, I did find that 1896 was the first year of the modern Olympic Games. So I said, guess what? I'm going to send her to Greece, and she's going to go see that. So that one's taking a little bit longer. You know, I have to research not only the games, but the Greek language and all this stuff. So, but that will hopefully be in print soon. So.
Excellent.
That's
Great.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. Wow. And you know, there's so many things I could talk to you about, but I just want to mention, I know that you also do work in mathematics and studying mathematics and so on, and we were discussing earlier the false impression that people have of people who are creative writers. They think that they can only do creative writing, but oftentimes they are multi-didasts. They can do many different things, and I think it's to your credit that you can balance all these things in school. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I try.
All right.
19-year-old. And
I
look
know.
at her.
19,
Three novels.
19,
Jeez.
man. That is so cool. And one other thing, we were talking about this before, short story submissions.
Yes.
Can you tell people a little bit about how you go about short story submissions? If they're ever wondering, maybe they're sort of hanging like, oh, I have these stories, I don't know where to submit these things. Tell them how you do this.
Well, what I do is I get the Writer's Digest magazine, but if you just go on their website, they have some great databases, some great lists of if you have specific types of fiction, where you can send those to. And, you know, if you go on a big site like that, it's all vetted, it's all credible. You know, you're not just going to send your work to some Joe Schmo magazine that, you know, prints one copy for your happy use.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been doing, is going through those lists and
You
seeing
have a
what
lot of
fits my
short stories published?
Nope, not yet.
But you're working on it.
Yes, I am.
Good for you.
Keeps it going. All right, yeah. Do you have something you'd like to read to us?
Sure. So I'm going to read from the first Kissimmee book, just called Kissimmee's Newport, 1894. I'm going to start in the middle, because it's the most exciting part. And then I'll leave you all hanging.
That's good.
So the premise is that Kissimmee has been denied the ability to go to this society party that she wants to go to, because she thinks that's going to be really exciting, you know, a party where there's dancing and lots of people. But she's got a plan. Now it's evening. Everyone except me is ready to go to the bridges. Mother is wearing one of her silk dresses, and she's telling me to behave. Father's giving instructions to Greta Weefers, the housekeeper, telling her that all the servants need to be watching me. She's one of the few servants Mother and Father say it's fine to talk to. Mother and Father call her Mrs. Weefers, even though she isn't married. It's some weird rule of society that housekeepers are always called Mrs. Orlando keeps giving me looks like, ha ha, I get to go and you don't. I make angry faces at him until Mother tells me to pay attention to her. When they finally leave, Greta turns to me. In case you're wondering, Greta is an elderly woman who has a German accent and a habit of telling me I need to follow the rules. It's pretty much what the housekeeper's job is, to keep everyone in order. But she still smiles and explains things in such a way that I still like her. I suppose you'll want to do something before dinner? She asks. I nod and start thinking. I have to wait until Brandon, who's the coachman, he drives the carriages, comes back with the carriage so I won't be caught on the road going to the bridges. Something interesting. Can I be shown the servants' quarters? Like where you sleep? Greta laughs and rubs my head, which is another habit of hers. I can't do that. Your mother would never allow it. However, you are permitted to eat dinner with us. You shall see where we eat. I smile for a second before I remember I won't be here for dinner. Drat. Greta sees the look on my face and adds, Don't worry, child. We eat good food. I have to remember to smile and look normal. Just then, Kelly, who's my maid/nanny if you don't remember, walks by. I overheard we can go in the family rooms so long as we're watching Kissimmee, she says. Cassie, I mutter under my breath. That's correct, Greta says. Well, I was thinking cards in the ocean view room. Greta looks toward me for approval. Playing cards is boring, but it's better than doing nothing, so I say yes. We play Go Fish, Crazy Eights, King and Jack. I made that one up. And they teach me to play something called rummy. Then it's time for supper, which means it's time to start my scheme. I'm going to the bathroom, I announce. Kelly stands up with me. I'll go with you. The corridors can be confusing at night, and you do not know the way to the servants' hall. Okay, I say. No, I add in my head, not okay. I realize with Greta that I have to act normal. Normal is letting Kelly come to the bathroom with me. She lights a candle and we head off. Think. How am I going to escape now? Kelly is right in front of me. I go into the bathroom. This gives me time to think some more. Best thing I can come up with is to hide behind a potted plant until Kelly walks out of sight. Kelly leads the way toward the servants' hall. I quietly shift behind a potted plant. Kelly keeps moving. Kelly continues walking. Yes! I do a victory cheer in my head before silently going down the stairs. Once I get downstairs, I hear something. Voices. I quickly hide behind another potted plant. And so now we have to eat dinner here. I believe my patience has been tried for the last time, boy. I think that's Bob. Well, I'm just doing what I want, Pa. I don't care what you or society thinks. I know that voice. I peek out from behind my plant. It's Timothy. Boy, I am making you muck stalls for a week. Timothy groans. You let that kiss-a-me get away with whatever she wants. After that, they're too far away for me to hear. I laugh at Timothy in my head. Bob will help me and not you. Nah, 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 nah. Then I remember to get out of the house before Kelly realizes I'm gone. When I get outside, I notice that the drive is lined with lanterns. They're probably for when Mother, Father, and Orlando come home. I pick one up and head in the direction of the Bridges house. Gosh, it's spooky at night. At least I have a lantern for a little bit of light. Please don't go out, please don't go out. I keep thinking someone's going to pop out of nowhere and kill me. Or take me away. I gulp. I try to think about the Bridges, and possible conversations I might have with Mother, and what I can say in my defense. A hooting bird makes my mind go blank. I look around to see if anyone else happens to be on the road. All I can see is a fence that's really just a wall, and the road. No one else, just the dark. This is very, very scary. My heart starts pounding louder, and for the first time I think that maybe this wasn't a good idea. I hear a gust of wind, and then whoosh, my lantern's out. What do if you're all alone, outside at night with only a little knowledge of where you are? You panic, you freak out, you try to light your lantern again, but the match is conveniently located in the bottom compartment. Who there? Some voice from close by whispers. Ah! Who are you? And that's where I'll end.
That was good, thank you. Yes. How old were you when you wrote that?
When I wrote that particular piece, I was probably about 13. Got published
Amazing.
when I was 16.
Excellent.
That is
amazing.
crazy. Wow, that's so cool. So you're working on the next one,
Yep.
and you're going to school. And there's something I wanted to ask. What was I thinking? Oh, yeah. The process of writing, I just want to briefly mention, you say you write these out longhand, right?
The Kiss-A-Me series is all out longhand, yep.
That is really interesting. And you chose a first-person present tense.
Yes.
Did you just naturally want to do that with that piece, or did you intentionally go, okay, I know that if I go first-person present tense, the reader is not going to know what's happening, and they'll want to keep reading?
I actually started this in middle school, and I was bored in homeroom, and so I was just doodling on the side of my agenda. So instead of doodling, I wrote, and that's just what
It
came
picked
to
you.
me.
Yeah,
I
the
didn't know I
story.
was, stream of consciousness is this fancy thing, and William Faulkner did it, and I don't know. I was 12, and I just wrote like that.
Well, you've
Well,
done great,
yeah.
and it's terrific, Emily.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you for
Emily.
having me.
Yes. Hopefully we'll have you back here in another 2 years, and you'll have 6 novels published.
EmilyKMurphy.com, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be right back. We're wrapping up another edition of the Taco Society Presents, and that was quite a episode, huh?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Stacey and Kristi and Emily,
One for the books.
3 women.
3 first-time women
First
guests.
time.
Yeah.
2 of them came about 3 hours away to
From
come here.
Connecticut,
Yeah.
yeah. They traveled to get here to be with us.
Yeah, man.
And speaking of
And
traveling,
one is 19 years old, too, which is fantastic.
oh yeah,
Emily's
yeah,
awesome.
very talented. But speaking of traveling, one of us was in France. Yeah, I had a great time, and she came back and brought her co-hosts some T-shirts.
I didn't even
So-
get one for myself.
No,
so.
well, I got a nice
Whoa.
one. They just got regular
Yeah, you
ones. So.
totally did it for us. This is awesome. Wow, man.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very
You guys
much.
are my pals. So.
Well, we're the Taco
land
Society.
of Tony and myself's ancestors.
Is
That-
there, is
that's
there a
right.
French word for taco, or do they just use the
They
Mexican
just use taco.
I think it's
Yeah.
taco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed tonight, and we think you're really going to enjoy our Halloween specials coming up. We've got 4 guests, very, very. I consider them big guests. I think you guys do too, and I know they're very big in New England, and a couple of them are bestsellers, and I think you're going to enjoy it. We can't say their names right now. But we will announce it on Facebook in a couple of weeks. And we hope you tune in. It'll be 2 separate shows, 2 hours, each show an hour, for a total of 2 hours. 1 + 1 is 2, right? Yeah.
Dose.
Yeah, dose.
Dose
Yeah, here we go,
X's.
dose, yeah. Dos Rooster.
Yeah, what were we talking about writers being good at multi-dialect?
Like, yeah,
people?
I can't think of one thing. And what was I talking about? Again, thank you very much, guys. You did great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait till next month, and we'll just we'll have a big party afterwards.
It would be virtually awesome.
We're
Sounds
off to eat
good.
some tacos, and thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.